Hi everyone. Can everyone see me and hear me well? Amazing. I'll just wait to 1 or 2 minutes additionally for us to start. Sure, of course. I'll wait just 1 additional minute and we can start. Nothing to thank for, Alison. Thank you for being here. All right. Let's start. First of all, hi everyone. I'm Mário from FARFETCH. Thank you so much for being here. It's really an honor for me to be able to share a bit of what we've been doing at FARFETCH regarding cloud intelligence within this amazing group. Thank you so much to Alan, to Alison, to Toby, and to all the remaining speakers for all the work that all of you did while organizing this amazing day. Okay. Some introductions before I jump onto the specific of the topic. Today I'm the head of Insights and Enablement for talent acquisition at FARFETCH. Okay. Within this role, I oversee several verticals. Talent intelligence, of course, one of them, but also talent sourcing, talent partnering, executive hiring, and last but definitely not least, tools and systems. Okay, so just within the overall context of my remit. Today, I'm here to share a bit with you what has been our journey to make sure we are able to have data-driven conversations while discussing talent acquisition, talent attraction and acquisition, geographical strategy. Okay, hence the topic of or the title of this session, putting science into the heart of location strategy. It's less romantic than it sounds. Okay, so in the end of the day, it's a lot of data, a lot of algorithms, and some math. But really deep diving on the topic today, I'm going to present to you a geolocation index that we've built in-house in order to really support these analytical conversations while discussing talent strategy, geographically speaking. Okay. For a second. Okay. So that was exactly the question we were trying to solve while building this index. It was basically how to determine where the investment for the acquisition of talent should be planned and allocated. How can we decide it? And we started to define the variables that are relevant for us while analyzing each geographical unit. Sorry. Okay. Every time you'll hear me talk about geographical unit. It's because while we are analyzing this type of data, we need to be very careful with the scale of the geographical basis we are using. Practical example. Look, if I cannot compare Portugal with UK, right? If much, I need to compare Portugal with London, because in terms of the size of the geographical unit, in terms of the scale, they are more or less really the same scale. Okay, so every time you hear me talk about geographical unit, this is exactly what it means. It's a unit adjusted to the overall size of it. Okay. So the first variable, it was clear for us that is really critical for this type of analysis, was the size of the talent pool. Okay, within the target core competencies that we are looking for. Okay, this is also an additional insight, which is this geolocation index. We started calculating it by job profile. Okay, and we should always do and have that approach, because it's the lowest unit we can have in terms of analyzing the core competencies that is characterizing it. Okay. After that, you can start thinking of grouping at the job family level, or at eventually a hub level. Imagine that you have a stakeholder of yours saying that we need to build an additional hub somewhere around the world that is a mixed one. You have engineering and product, we have supply chain and logistics. So these are big job families composed by several job profiles that we need to have its core competencies target in order to be able to really assess what's the size of the talent pool in each geographical unit. Okay. The second variable is the quality of this target pool. Okay, we call it Q. Actually, right now we have a big program undergoing within our talent intelligence roadmap, which is exactly to try to understand what quality means for us. I know everyone and all of us, we spend a lot of time, and all talent acquisition teams are looking for their A+ talent around the world, but A+ talent means different things depending on your specific context of your organization. Okay? And that realization of what A+ talent means in a very analytical way, it's quite of a challenge for us to solve, and that's exactly what we are doing right now with different initiatives that I will not have unfortunately time to present here today. The third variable, it's what we call the talent unitary cost. Okay, I'll deep dive in a bit in my next slide. How do you calculate this? This talent unitary cost has to do not only with the average annual gross salary per geographical unit, it takes also into consideration the demand of talent in that geographical unit in order for us to try to have an approach to cost inflation, talent cost inflation during time. Okay, I'll go there in the next slide in a minute. Office space, if you want to consider this is optional. It depends on your work policies and how do you perceive they are going to go in the future. Corporate tax is very important, called CT. Talent attraction capacity. This talent attraction capacity index, it's basically a way for us to really acknowledge that we have some geographical units that are very, very capable of attracting talent from neighbor geographical units. So we cannot consider just the size of its talent pool. It's also the capacity of their that they have to attract talent from abroad. And last but not least, quality of life. This quality of life means several things. It's also a composed index. Takes into consideration things like purchase power, well-being, the quality of the public services, things like this. Okay. Now, going to the good part. How can all of these variables interact together, mathematically speaking, in order to give us a very, very unbiased geolocation index that will allow us to rank geographical units in terms of their suitability in terms of decision making for specific core skills or core competencies? Well, after many interactions and many simulations, we've reached this equation. Okay. I'll jump already on my next slide, so I can deep dive and explain you how this is interacting. Okay, so if you look at the left side of the equation, it's basically a pool cost benefit index, because you are multiplying the size of the talent pool per its quality, okay, and then we are dividing it per the cost, okay. So this TC plus S plus CT, it's cost of the talent, cost of space, and corporate taxes. And then the right side of the equation, it's basically, we could call it a geo-attraction index, because it's the coefficient between the international attraction capacity that a specific geographical unit has with its own quality of life, which of course they are related in the end of the day. Okay. Now let's deep dive on each variable and how we were calculating it, or are calculating it. Okay. So the size of the talent pool, which is the T, it's a very straightforward one. It's basically a gradient that we build based on raw data acquisition from a talent social network. We've been using mostly LinkedIn. Actually, and bear with me on this, because actually one of the other initiatives that we're working right now is how can we make sure that we have this index being updated at a semester basis for all the job panels that we have in-house, okay? But for us to have that, we need to have consistent data sources through time, and that's a big challenge. But if we are able to achieve that, then suddenly you have an historical calculation and assessment of the index through time, which means that as soon as you have that, eventually we can start talking about predictability for the future, with defining trends and applying some statistical analysis on how these indexes varying through time. Then quality, it's a coefficient between an indicator of the university's quality and what we call, and the coefficient that we consider basically based on the companies with high relevance for us. This is where we have that program that I just shared, which is how to determine the high relevance companies in a very specific geographical unit per core competencies, meaning who are potentially the companies that can be our talent suppliers in terms of quality, okay, in each geographical unit. This is something that we are also tackling to make sure we are that we are mapping the right companies while calculating these quality coefficient. Okay. As I was sharing with you, TC, meaning the cost of talent, it's a coefficient between the annual gross salary index and a coefficient based on demand for talent. This is our way to try to predict salary inflation through time. Office space is self-explanatory. Corporate taxes also, it's a gradient that we build in comparison between all the geographical units. Actually, corporate taxes, we need to build it mostly at the country level, and also the same applies for the International Talent Attraction Index. And last but not least, the quality of life, which is it's self-explanatory, and I'll share with you a business case. Well, actually, a very specific example that we did for data science. Now, the data I'm going to show you, and please, I need to apologize right now about that. I'll not be able to share with you updated data, okay? Due to confidential policies, of course, confidentiality policies, but I will share with you a business case that we did specifically for the data science profile in 2018, okay? And we were able to see what data sources did we use at the time, but also how the results showed at the time and what can we do with them. So in 2019, we've applied this equation and the algorithm overall to a very specific data science profile. Of course, we've mapped all the competencies that we need to do, and we've worked on top of that. So the T, which is the size of the talent pool, for that we use LinkedIn Talent Insights. For quality, we've used CS rankings, and of course also LinkedIn Talent Insights for target companies. For cost of talent, we've used Redford, Contrix, Payscale, but also Talent Insights in terms of in order for us to measure demand and to try to predict inflation. For cost of space, studies from CBRE and Cushman and Wakefield, corporate taxes from Deloitte, international attraction capacity from EMD. Actually, EMD has an annual study about this that is quite thorough. And quality of life, last but not least, from Numbeo. Just for you to have a sneak peek of the type of results and what you can do with them. This was the first interaction. Okay, so this is the left side of the equation, what I was sharing with you, which was the pool cost benefit. So the index gives you a ranking. At this time, we did it at a country level. Bear with me, I know it's not right. We don't do it anymore, but at the time we did it just to test the data. And then you have like a ranking of pool cost benefit per country, or for the countries. The higher the index, the more suitable or a better decision will be for you to hire and scale your talent there. Okay, so it's and I ask your attention because it's quite interesting. If you look at the first 5 countries from a pool cost benefit, you see China, Singapore, India, Israel, and Canada. But then when you overlook the overall index, which is the next slide, so this is the geolocation index results, you see that the first 5, for example, all of them change, but the first 5 are very, very, very clear in the way they changed. So you have Singapore, Switzerland, Canada, Israel, and US. The main reason is why? Well, because of the international attraction capacity and also quality of life. Just to show it again. So this is the pool cost benefit. And this is the geolocation index. Okay. Of course, this is a very basic way to show the data in a graphic, but because you have the index and all the data, you can present this data in a map or in any other way that you might find useful. It's in the end of the day, it's a way for you to sit down with your stakeholders and business decision makers, and to really have a very, very analytical conversation about where should be hiring a very specific palette of skills, or a combination of them, or a combination of job families. And this is it. Questions, please. Any questions? I don't know if the lack of questions is a good thing or a bad thing. Oh, amazing. Starting with Toby's question. It depends on the teams, Toby. Imagine tech teams, this was like gold for them, okay, because they are by default very, very data-driven and analytical. There are other areas within the business that take a little bit longer to recognize this. And of course, this is an interpretation of, in a way of us to tackle the issue. I mean, I will not be cocky here by saying that this is the only way we can measure this. It's a way to measure this, and actually, I think the solid gold will be for us to have this and to be able to calculate this index through time and have a big series of it, historical analysis to really then after start predicting the future. But the first reaction was quite positive. Regarding to James' question, yes, I mean the geolocation index is calculated based on a job profile, meaning job profile that is characterized by a group of core competencies and skills. We are always aiming for that. That's actually the only way we can follow to be able to determine the size of the talent pool and its quality. regarding your first question, Kumar, eventually that's an interesting one. So Kumar is asking, is there a way to incorporate other parameters like InfoSec risk, language proficiency, etc.? Of course, but we are not there yet. Okay, we are still in the stage in which we really need to stabilize our data sources in order for us to be consistent in the way we are calculating the index through time. Okay, and as soon as we have that, eventually we need to start giving it more complexity and more customizable depending on eventually groups or job families. This is something we still need to work on, but for sure we will try to do so. Regarding Elizabeth questions on how long did the index take to develop, it's still being developed. if you're asking around the math side of it, it took us like 6 months on interacting with all the data and we'll try to see if mathematically speaking, all the variables were being matched and combined and working in the right way. So I would say like 6 months for sure. Last but not least, question from Kumar: how do you deal with the outliers? Talent pool comparing. Yes, amazing question. This is one of the reasons why even the definition of what we understand as geographical unit, it's one of the main challenges also, as we are really trying again to grant this data consistency through time. Because there's also a very critical topic here, which is how do you make sure that you have data sources that are consistent worldwide. And that has been quite of a challenge, to be honest with you. And because of that, you might see outliers above and below, depending, of course, on the data sources we are using. So that type of calibration, we are still really trying to figure out how can we solve this in a sustainable way. There are job families that we are quite proficient already in having this geolocation index. Through time in terms of data sources and how we are calculating it, it's fine because we are for example, for data science, we are calculating it since 2019, so we already have some data there. For other areas, in terms of outliers, we are still trying to figure out how to deal with them. To be honest, and that's why for some job families, the conclusions we take from this index, we take it with a pinch of salt because we realize and we acknowledge that eventually have some issues on the data sources. Okay, so yeah. Any additional questions? I'm seeing so the question from Kenneth. Would large-scale versus COVID lockdowns, availability of the index. So how would you adjust this? Look, this is a yes and no, Kenneth, because look, eventually it will affect the, of course, the office variable for sure, and eventually the demand, the data that we use to predict inflation. But apart from it, look, we are talking about big sets of data that are a little bit resilient into specific situations. Imagine size of talent pools, quality of the talent pools. COVID eventually didn't change that. It might have changed the demand for talent specifically. It might have changed, as for example, considering cost of space a lot, because it changed a little bit the mindset of how our companies are organizing work policies for the future. But overall, the majority of the variables are quite constant. Kumar, I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you say you're saying that I have tried to use Z-score or simpleton scale? Ellison, regarding your question, so Ellison is asking how often are you running How often are you running? Sorry, I just lost it. Sorry. How often are you running location projects? Is it costed? We try to do a sanity check every year. Okay, to really try to understand if locations we have, not that we are chasing locations every year, it's not that, but we tend to take a look into it and to see if the rationale is still valid, if not, what's happening. So yes, for sure. Oh, this score, yeah, a simple 10 scale. It's an idea for outliers, come on, for sure, for sure. It's a good idea. Not rules, Alison. So we tend to look into this from a hub perspective. Okay, so see a hub as a combination of several job families or just one, depending on the context. And then we decompose that into job profiles, and these job profiles are decomposed into core competencies and core skills, and then we run the analysis based on that. Okay. We are even trying to do things like predicting, based on the cost of talent, trying to predict how salary inflation is going to behave in each geographical unit, or meaning city or country, to eventually to adjust our own budget exercise into that every year, okay, to try to predict. But again, on that specific part, and going to Kenneth's question, on that specific part, events like COVID have a big impact on the quality of this data and predictability for sure. Additional questions? Any additional question? Great question, Toby. I was hoping for someone to ask me that. Look, the next evolution for the tool, I will not call it a tool yet, to be honest, because the next evolution for sure it's automation. This is the calculation of this still has a big part of manual work. Okay, that is completely it's automizable. Okay, so it's possible. It's quite possible the automation there. So the next stage is that we need to automate what you cannot automate to be able to have something similar to a tool that can run from time to time and can easily be available in a timely way for decision making. But that's the great question for the future. Is how do you automate this? At the same time, you are still calibrating some parts of it. So that's the complexity of it, for sure. Additional questions? Actually, it's not, when I talk about real estate, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but yes, in terms of the acceptance of the areas, look, this is used basically when I talk about annual or mid, at least town strategy, okay, and the areas have been receiving this quite well, okay. The most analytical areas within the company, like imagine tech overall, they all have this from the start. Other areas took a little bit more time to align with it, but the overall feedback it's quite good. Yeah. Additional questions? We are reaching the end of our time. Okay, thanks everyone for being here. It was really a pleasure. If you have any additional question or you want to debate this, please reach out directly to me through LinkedIn or whatever you want. But amazing. Thank you so much for attending. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Bye-bye.